I will say, if you're going to go in there every week of the summer and bust around, I do think you're going to have a negative impact. But if you're going to go in there a day or two and like really break it down, I'm not worried about bumping them at all. Like, they'll come back. Like I said, unless you set up camp in there and you're just like in there the whole summer, I think you're good. I mean, as the season gets closer, I would definitely try to keep that intrusion and disturbance to a minimum. But if you're bumping them in 2 months before you hunt them one time, I don't think you're having any impact.
Welcome to the Just Hunt Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Just Hunt Podcast. This is episode 16. I think we have a pretty relevant topic at this time. It is just about mid-May here. We're in New Hampshire today. A lot of the leaves have popped. It's starting to green up pretty good. At some of the higher elevations, not so much green, and further north, not so much green. But in general, we're kind of right at that cusp of, that green up period. So in my mind, this marks like a distinct change between like two scouting periods, particularly in the big woods and the mountains. So I would say my favorite time to scout is probably from when the snow melts till right about now. So we're kind of getting out of like the best time to scout, in my opinion, which is when the leaves are off and the snow's off as well. Leaves off and hasn't greened up yet, I should say. So that late winter to early spring time frame. But of course, you don't always hit it. You maybe didn't have time to scout a particular area or scout at all, and this is the period you have. So now we're going to kind of focus on that green up period from then until, we'll say, early bow season. So like that late spring, mid to late spring, summer scouting period, and I think it's a very important one. I guess to make the distinction between the two and why they're different, at this time of year, that sign from the previous year starts to look really old. You could have a scrape that is just dirt, a month ago, and now you have some green grass coming up through it. You have some other stuff sprouting up. A lot of trails that used to be really defined. Maybe you're growing up with like ferns or whatever, early succession growth there is. The other thing that I think is a big deal is when the trees leaf out, you can't really see the topography as well. You can be sitting on like obviously if you're in the softwood, then you can't really see it any time of year. But if you're in the hardwoods, you can't really see that topography when you stand there and get a feel for it. And I'm really big on that. I like to stand in areas and look around. I like to look at my map on Hunt Stand and look at the terrain features, then go to those spots and see it on the map, then see it in person and really see how it comes together and get the scale of it. With the leaves on, you really don't get that scale. So what I would say is to kind of combat that is study your topo lines in your topography before you go into an area, and when you get in there, really go to like those features, and then you may not be able to see it, but know that you're standing where there should maybe be a scrape or a trail, and kind of look for those spots. Use your map, your phone or your map pretty heavily for that. Other than that, it's kind of buggy, which isn't always fun. Mosquitoes, black flies, horse flies, deer flies, that type of thing. But obviously that's kind of a whatever. It is what it is. And then of course it gets hot. But I think it's a good time to be in the woods. You don't have to worry about dressing, packing a lot of clothes, and if you ever got lost or something, you'd probably be all right. You don't have to worry about an overnight stay and the extreme cold or anything like that. So it's not a bad time of year. Also, I guess the other period or the end of this period, so late summer, you could potentially be scouting and finding fresh sign that could translate into a early archery type hunt. So that's good as well. This is also a great time if you're in mass crop country, particularly oaks, to scout for acorns. Maybe not so in the early spring, but you're talking early to midsummer. So I would say probably you can start to see acorns forming in probably June, at some point in June, maybe late June. Definitely by July and obviously August. I mean, some are dropping in August. So I'd say June. So, this is a broader time frame, but it's basically the leaf on time from green up until archery season. And I've done a lot of my scouting in that time period, particularly because I feel like in the past I would scout right after the season if we didn't have snow. So you're talking December, early January. But then we get that snow and that heavy, snowpack, that snow cover. And then in the spring, we get the melt off. But really, most of the time where I hunt, we don't lose snow until sometime in probably mid-April. Usually this year was a little bit earlier, but mid-April. And by that time, we're already hunting turkey somewhere. And so I don't really get to scout in this period very much. So I miss it a lot, and then I find myself scouting in June, July, August, whatever. So I've had a lot of experience doing it, and I think you still can be really effective, even though it's not like I think the ideal time to scout. Obviously, during the season's really good, but you're kind of limited on what you can do. You're trying to hunt at the same time. I don't feel like it's quite the same. So scouting during the season is good, but I feel like there's better times to scout, take more time, really break stuff down, and be relaxed and taking everything in and thinking about it. Whereas in the season, I feel like it's like a go, find that sign that's there right now, and you feel stressed or pressed to set up on it. So this is a good time to scout because there's no rush. You got usually plenty of time before archery season. You have any questions, Matt? We're going to kind of lead into some of the questions you have about this strategy and this time frame.
Yeah, so I guess depending on where you're at right now, you might be, if you're a couple hours north of us, you might still have that leaf off period where you still get the benefit of that early season or that
and far north
spring.
and in those higher elevations, if you're talking over 3,000 feet probably, and if you're northern Adirondacks, well, I don't know about. To be frank, I don't have much experience with the upper Midwest, like northern Minnesota or Wisconsin.
How early
UP
that green up happens.
Yeah, I'm not sure when that happens there, and I'm not sure when it happens in the Pacific Northwest, some of that big woods mountain stuff, and Washington, Idaho, Montana. I'm not familiar with that, so I don't know when that is. But I do know here, you still can hit that period probably until almost the end of May, in a lot of the areas. So
I was 2.5 hours north of here last weekend turkey hunting, and there was not a leaf on a tree. At 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet of elevation, and we've completely leafed out down here.
The last week.
So
depends on the weather too. If you get we've had warm, rainy weather, and it happened fast.
Yeah, so once we get a stretch, we've had a week or two straight of rain. It seems like at this point. Once we get a stretch of sun, stuff's gonna pop pretty heavily. But I guess to start off, doing spring scouting before everything greens up. Everything's pretty much written there for you the way that it was. So once the leaves come out and it becomes harder to see and stuff gets grown in and covered up, what are you now keying in on?
Well, it's the same stuff I'm keying in on before. It's just not quite as obvious. But here's the thing, two things don't really, or the two main things I'm looking for once I go to an area that I want to scout. I'm looking for big rubs, signpost rubs, and I'm looking for big primary scrapes. Those are the things I want to find. And to be honest with you, even if an area, and are good areas to hunt that don't have signpost rubs and big giant scrapes, but I'm probably not going to spend any time there if I don't find them. So I don't want to say they're no good, you can't kill a deer in them, deer aren't there, it's not a good spot. That's not true, but for me, I'm going to try to eliminate a lot of that stuff and really simplify my approach and my scouting process. So I'm not really going to, if I don't find what I'm looking for, which is one of those two things, I'm not going to spend any more time there.
And that's just based off of what you've kind of have found success with?
Yeah, I always say there's great places for big bucks to live, and there's great places to kill big bucks, and sometimes they're not the same place. You could be in an area that's extremely difficult to hunt, and it doesn't when you walk in there, nothing makes sense. It's nothing's defined, there's no focal point, everything's really spread out. It may be an awesome habitat. Areas that are notorious for this in my mind are huge areas of cuts, that's big and monotonous, all select cut or clear cut stuff, and it's there's a ton of deer in here. There's buck sign, but it is just sporadic. It's spread out through the whole thing. Well, how are you going to hunt that effectively? Unless you're going to, obviously if you're on, sure. Still hunting and tracking, it's a decent area. But if you're looking for an area to set up on a deer and kill it with a bow or with a gun during, in stand or sitting, I'm looking for areas that are easy to hunt and that make sense and are kind of logical. And so if I don't find that focal point with what I'm looking for, I just discount that area and I'll keep looking for another one. It doesn't mean it's not a big area. It doesn't mean there's not a big deer there. It could, but I'm hoping to find enough terrain features, enough habitat types that come together and change that it's going to promote that focal point of, big buck sign. So I guess what I'm leading into is the fact that it doesn't, even during green up, you can see big buck sign like that. You can see a signpost rub and you can see a scrape. Mm-hmm. It's just they're a little harder. Like that rub is going to look a little older than it did. It's not going to pop the same as it did, like, when it was before green up, essentially. Same thing with the licking branch. It's not going to look, you may have leaves growing off of it in spots, like if it's say a beech or an oak. So it's not as easy to see, but in the same thing with the scrape. You may have ferns growing up in it. Ferns maybe, depending on what time of the summer is, ferns you can't even see the scrape. Yeah, it's like covered in ferns. They probably aren't growing like very heavily, like actually in the scrape, but all around it are growing super heavy. So like they're tough to see. So it takes more time and you have to be more in tune to what you're looking for. The sign's a lot more subtle, but it's still there and you can still find it. So I'm going to with leaf off, like, early spring, late winter, you may see what you're looking for from 40, 50 yards away. Like, oh, I can see that scrape down there. You may have to walk right up to it. So I'll actually slow down and I'll look at like all these like potential areas where there could be a scrape, and I'll walk right up to that potential licking branch and see. Mm-hmm. Look at the branch. You can still see if the branch is tattered. It'll be worn down and it'll be abused and used if it's a legit scrape. The licking branch, no matter what it's on, you'll be able to tell that it's been worked. If it looks super healthy and it looks like a young branch, it's probably not getting worked. But I'll actually walk to each one of those licking branches within a small area and check every one to see if there's a scrape under it. So it's a lot less efficient, I guess, because you do have to go slower, but you can still do it. And if that's the time you have to do it, and maybe you scouted 10 other spots, before the leaves came on, and just get to these other ones you want to scout, so now you're doing that. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Great. Go for it. So that's the big one. And then once again, just like sitting there with your map and really looking at the topography and taking your time. You may have to walk a little more, to cover some ground, to get a feel for like how it lays, and be like, okay, like maybe walk, down over a saddle and down and like kind of walk the trails and get a feel for it. You're not going to sit there and see everything in front of you because you can't see that far. But if you walk around, you start to get a feel for it and put it together with your visual of your topo lines on your phone and then what you're seeing there and kind of covering the area. So I think it's a lot slower, I guess. You can't do it as fast. You can't just stand in one spot and see everything and it all just makes sense. From a visual perspective, it's a lot more like abstract, I guess, but you can still do it. So those are some of the main things, I think, that the main differences in how you can kind of adjust your approach.
As far I know that you're not doing a lot of like exploring new areas per se.
Not this year, no. I haven't this year.
So a lot of your cameras are like have been there for a period of time.
So yeah, I mean for me right now for this season in particular, I just haven't had a chance. And honestly, I have more than I can hunt right now with good deer. So like I just don't. Yeah, I mean, I probably should. Yeah. But it's not in the cards right now. I just got too much going on.
But if you were doing that, or for somebody, somebody who is in the process of that, are you? I guess what's your strategy with setting up cameras this early in the year?
So I mean, you can do it. I think cell cameras can be a little bit cost prohibitive to run those things year round. Like I don't have mine on. I have a couple on, but like I don't have mine on. I'd like to have them on to know what's. I mean, I got a buck the other day that was, had like this much growth and had route time started, and he looks like a good deer. And on one of the, I think I have two that are on right now, and that's cool to see. Like that's going to be a good deer, I bet. That much growth in May, had some decent mass, but like that's not really that helpful right now. Like this time of year. It's not helpful until I think you get into like late summer and you can see really what the deer is, and he's in an area, because there's a potential that you could actually hunt him in that area in the fall. Till you're getting close to the season, it's tough to say. I mean, deer could come and go a million times. Batteries and cell data isn't super cheap right now. So like, I'm trying. I don't really want to run all my cameras right now. If you have one it's not a cell camera and the batteries last for 3 years, yeah, why not throw it out there? And also, like, I always say sometimes it takes a while to get cameras out, right? Like, you have to kind of put them out when you have the opportunity. So if you're in an area in late May and you don't think you're going to be back till, the season or maybe whenever, yeah, put it out then. Obviously, it's a couple things to keep in mind this time of year is the deer may not be in the same place late summer. They may not be in the same place early season during the rut. So I think a lot of things could change. They could say the same, though, as well. That happens. Also, you have to be cognizant of the fact that the vegetation is rapidly growing right now. So if you put a camera up in late May, you have to be aware of where you put it. I actually really like running cameras when I put them up. I don't put many up unless they're like over scraping like the dark timber. So like under a big canopy, because there's not going to be a ton of undergrowth if the sunlight isn't getting to the forest. So like a lot of that stuff, there's like no undergrowth. And that's a lot of areas with good deer and good deer habitat have undergrowth, but that doesn't mean the whole area has to have. There's like, pockets of dark timber or like spruce fir or whatever that you're not going to have that. So those are good places to run cameras. Not so much for a food aspect, but like if you can find a cut with like, a big spruce or fir stand off of it, we'll run it right on the edge, just inside, make a mock scrape, and you'll get those deer, feeding around that cut in the summer. They're not going to stay in the cut the whole summer. They'll move around and you'll get a picture of them. So that's kind of that's my thought on putting them out now. As far as like locations, I'm getting pictures of bucks right now. In May on scrapes, I had pictures of on them. I don't know if it's the same deer yet, but I think there's potential they could be on the same scrapes. I had them during the rut. So like, the areas don't change that much if you're going to run them on scrapes. If you want to concentrate them on like summer food sources, which is mostly like cuts, and I'd really focus on those cuts that are like young cuts, and that it depends where you're at and how fast the regen is in your area, if it's a north or south facing, if it's been wet years. There's a lot of variables in there, but I'd look at like maybe like 2 to 7 year old cuts where you have that like really young growth still. When you get past that, it's still good browse, but it gets a little bit woody. The plants get more mature, and probably the browse quality is not quite there. So I think those deer are really keying in on those prime, probably high water and high protein, summer food sources. So if you want to find a buck during the summer, and then even potentially hunt them early season, depending on what your September, October food source is, I'd focus those around those like younger cuts if you can find them. So that would be the focus. I mean, if you're going to set cameras up, I guess also it just depends on what your goal is. Is it just to like find out what's in the area? Is it to try to kill a buck during the early season? Is it to try to kill a buck during the rut? So I would probably hang cameras based on what my objective is. And if I'm trying to kill a buck during the rut, well, maybe I'm not going to focus on those cuts. Maybe I'll let a camera soak in what I think is a rut area, like a big funnel or a big travel corridor or a primary scrape, which primary scrapes are good year round in any season to hang cameras and get pictures of bucks. So you just want to be aware of like, hey, what's my goal here? Maybe you don't know. Maybe it's your first year. Well, put a couple on a cut, or put one on a cut for the summer, put one on a big scrape, put one on a travel corridor, whatever, and spread them out and start to learn about the area. I think that's probably the objective of a new area the first year anyway. So spread them out, try some different stuff. They're useful to run, but I don't really get serious about them until we're talking like July or August, really. Like, I'd say July 1st is really, unless they're already out, is like the earliest I'll like go hang cameras. And then even now, like if I could just snap my fingers and have all my cameras out, I'd probably snap my fingers somewhere in the first week in August. The reason I put them out is in early July is because it's just a process to get them out, and I got to start to have them all out by like mid-August, right? Start to go to these different areas. So, I think that's kind of the mindset there. I used to be like an early, like July 4th. Like that was like, all right, got to get all of them out. But, by that time you can kind of tell if the bucks are going to be good bucks. You can recognize a buck from years past potentially. But really late July, early August, they're pretty much done growing. You can tell what they're going to be, and there's a decent chance if they're there during that time frame that they'll be there, early season into the season, depending on the deer and his personality.
We just did a Q&A podcast a couple weeks ago. I think it was episode 13 if you want to go back and watch it, but where we talked about buck ranges and kind of how they vary depending on the deer between like summer and fall, and then rut, and how those can all vary. We had a lot of people who wrote in with kind of questions about they had deer patterned in an area that they were frequenting early season or even like early October, and then they disappeared, and seemed like they were more concerned with trying to kill them later on. But
I think I know where you're going with it, but
I guess my question is in your experience, how many or what percentage of bucks tend to stick relatively close to their summer range? And
man, I haven't ever thought of like what percentage. I'll think about it now for a second. Look at these deer up here on the wall. Well, let's go through them quick. That buck was in the summer range, and I had him through the season. That buck was in the area in the summer, but I killed him probably 1.5 miles from where he was in the summer. So there's a little shift there. That deer didn't go anywhere. I killed him in the spot I was getting his pictures in July and November. I'm not sure on that deer. That deer shifted a lot. I was lucky enough to be at both ends of his range, so I knew about it. But like we had him in the summer, we had him kind of throughout the season. So he shifted, probably a similar range to that buck, but did not stay in the same place. That buck right there, I had him all summer. He left, so I had him all summer. He left when he shed velvet, and then he came back, and I killed him in November, about 700 yards from where I had him in the summer.
Yeah. Quick pause. When you say you had them, how frequently are you getting pictures of them?
It varies. I mean, 1 or 2 pictures is enough to know they're in the area for me. So like some of these deer, I may have had them like 1 or 2 times during the summer, and then this happened.
Yeah.
That deer I never had during the summer, not one time, but I had him for 4 years come October. That deer didn't have enough data on him to know. The next one over, I wouldn't. Well, I killed him early season, about 1.5 miles from where I had him the previous year, all through October, November, December. So he was in like an early season or summer area. So I would assume that buck, if I hadn't killed him, would have shifted back to where I had him the year before. That one I don't know enough about. That's a pretty good sample size. The one in velvet,
you're saying?
Yeah. And there's another one here that tough to say on him as well. Didn't really have enough information. So that gives you a pretty good idea. So I would say out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we'll call it 7 bucks that I had a lot of information on.
All from the same area.
In general, yeah. I mean, some are, general region, we'll say.
Right,
yeah. I'd say, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So one shifted in the like 1 to 2 mile range. One shifted, I think, a long way because I had him at all in the summer. One shifted and came back. One shifted probably that 1 to 2 mile range. One didn't go anywhere. That one was probably in the 1 mile range. That one didn't go anywhere. So I don't know. It's probably like 33% of a third of the bucks stay, pretty much in the same spot. Then a third will come and go and have a shift, and then maybe another third have a big shift where you're just not going to find them between the summer and like you just have them in the early season and maybe in velvet. You're never going to have them in November, or the other way around. You never have them early and you have them in November. So it depends. It really depends. And I wouldn't, in my opinion, and we talked about this last time, you want to try to kill them where you have the most information on them. Mm-hmm. And if you only have information on them in the summer, and this is why this time of year it may not be very useful, you probably don't have enough. You're probably not going to kill them. Like you don't. you don't have a good chance unless you happen to stumble across where he shifts to. But if you have them this time of year and then you have them also throughout the fall, well, then that information like this time of year could be useful. If nothing else, know the deer's alive and in the area and prepare to hunt them. Get some cameras in there, do some scouting, maybe hang some stands, etc., freshen up scrapes, whatever you want to do. So that scouting this time of year, like I said, it can be like really good because the deer stays right there, or it could be completely useless. You get a picture of a giant in, early July and you watch him for 2 months, and then he sheds velvet. You get one bloody pic of him, and then he's gone. And then either you get him the next summer, or he winds up dead and 10 miles away. If you see him on Facebook posts or something on social media. So like it's tough to say really. That's why I don't go too crazy with the cameras and the deer right now. And the other thing is if the deer they don't shift and you get their pictures this summer, well, you'd get their pictures in September too to hunt them, and you'd get their pictures in October, and you'd get them in November as well. So it's not like you're losing all that much not having the picture of the buck in, July in the same area. You can't hunt them in July. So like I said, it's if you want to and you have the time and you have the resources, the trail camera batteries, and go for it. I mean, why not? But I don't think it's necessary if you're trying to manage your time and your budget, if that makes sense. And then obviously that plays a big part of this. Are these deer that you find in the summer, are they going to be in these areas come fall? Tough to say. Unless, of course, you're finding that big rut sign. That's the end all be all in my mind because, and it may be that, a velvet buck is in that area near that big rut sign and he may leave and another buck may come in. So it might not necessarily be that buck you're getting pictures of that left that sign or is going to be there this fall, but there's a pretty good chance another one will move in, in that probably, well, it depends. They shift. I've seen them shift anywhere from like mid-August through like late October into areas. And then you get those like random cruisers during the rut too. So there's always potential from like mid-August through mid-November for a big deer to show up out of nowhere and make a shift, or at least make a loop, or make an excursion as they call it. Well, he'll go from his home range to a different area, spend a period of time there, and come back, and it may be a pretty big distance, and we see that. So yeah, I mean, don't get too caught up on it. Could be useful. It may not be useful. It could be extremely frustrating. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of that.
When you say rut sign specifically, what are you referring to?
Yeah, in my mind, it's this big signpost rubs are like huge rubs. Maybe an area that's just shredded with big rubs too. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a signpost, but an area with a ton of big buck sign, or some big scrapes, like one or two big scrapes in an area where I want to and expect to find them, not like a random spot. So an area of interest based on the habitat types, the location, the elevation, and the topography. So I want all those to coincide, and then I want to find the big buck sign in that spot where all those come together. Now it's like, okay, I can kind of trust that buck sign means something because they, from my experience, they should be there because of all those factors. And when you go in there and find it, and you're like, okay, this makes sense. Now you can kind of make a plan to hunt it because it's a more predictable area, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Now, you can find a bunch of sign. There's another period that I think bucks lay down a ton of sign on that can be deceiving, but also can be very helpful, and that's that early season period. In my mind, it's the 2 weeks after like they shed velvet. So whenever that is. Some bucks won't shed velvet till the 15th of September. Some bucks will shed it on August 25th. So there seems to be a period there, and they get, that testosterone ramps. It's the end of summer. That testosterone and I think the daylight ramping, it ramps because of daylight, but the shortening days. But that testosterone ramps, they shed velvet, and then they have like this testosterone-driven period where they're just like shredding saplings. It's what I see mostly. I don't see them like going into big, huge trees, but they're just like shedding velvet and just like thrashing trees and just like, I don't know what they're doing. They're getting frisky.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of little sparring. It's like friendly sparring though. It's not like I'm going to kill this buck. It's like bachelor groups of bucks, together, ripping up trees, sparring, scraping. So if you find a bunch of like saplings shredded around like an early season food source, it's usually, I think, made by bucks in the early season right after they shed velvet. So if you have an early-ish opener and that food source is productive again that year, that could be a really good indication that you want to be in there, when the season opens, if you're an archery hunter. So that, I think, is a way to utilize the summer scouting too, to capitalize on an early season thing. The other thing we talked about is scouting for acorns too. So let's just make a scenario. You go into an area, maybe you have history, maybe you don't. Maybe you find some big rut sign in the area, but then you find an area that's a big oak flat or a bench on the side of the mountain, and it's shredded with those sapling rubs. They're going to look older, obviously. It's a year later, but you can still see them. Our regen in this one, I guess, important thing. If you're listening to this and you don't live in like the north, like the far north, like New England, Adirondacks, or some of that upper Midwest, or maybe the Pacific Midwest, our regen is really slow here. So our rubs from last year still look pretty fresh. But if you live in like Appalachia, Southern Ohio, Kentucky, mountains, any of that stuff, maybe down into like Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, like those mountains, that regen is a lot faster. And those rubs will heal over in like almost a year or two, almost to the point where you can't see them anymore. That was a huge eye-opener for me when I started hunting Ohio. I remember there was just like, actually, it was the rub line that buck made right there coming up this edge on the edge of like a CRP and timberline. And I killed that deer, and I remember we scouted it the next summer. And I brought a couple guys into that farm to scout it. And I was like, oh, it's unbelievable how many rubs are up and down this edge. I was like all fired up to see them. And you walk in there, I'm like,
it's just all
like,
gray.
where are they going? They're like pretty much like just recovered already. And so you got to keep that in mind and how fast your trees heal. But where we're at in the north, we have short growing seasons, poor soils. The regen isn't very quick. So you can see all that sign for at least a couple of years. So if you find that, maybe you find a scrape on that bench, good scrape or a series of scrapes, and then you bring your binos with you and you glass into the canopy on some of those, probably red oak if you're in the mountains. It could be white oak though too. And you start to see acorns up on the canopy. Well, that could be a really good place to be in September. That scouting could pay off during bow season. Those are really the two periods I'm looking for, is like that early season, and then the second period, I guess, would be the rut. So late October through November. That mid-October time frame is so hit or miss. Both of these areas could work during that time frame, but I don't know. I struggle from like October 7th through, early November.
Yeah, you've had some luck though, like first couple weeks though, right?
Absolutely. I think that's that and the rut is. Man, those are the two best, I think, times to kill a big buck. Is that early part of the season, like right when your season opens, whenever that is. The earlier the better, honestly. I've had success from September 1st all the way up through October 7th, and any time in that period, if you find the hot food source in a big buck, and where he likes to, the first food source he hits closest to his bed, and this isn't just in the mountains or this is anywhere. You find that food source, that buck is usually not going very far at all. He usually hasn't been messed with. He's relaxed, and pretty good chance you can catch him in daylight if you're careful with your entry and exit and you time the fronts. So I've had a lot of luck. I look at the deer I've killed, and it's like, a lot of them are in that early season time frame. I do really well there. So it's a great period for sure.
I guess so. We just kind of talked about one of them at least a little bit, with trying to keep tabs on deer throughout a season when a lot of them shift to different areas.
Yeah.
But what are some other things that you think people might mistake when summer scouting?
So, and the thing that pops to mind the quickest, and we kind of already touched on it, but I just want to reiterate it, is you have a contrast between fresh sign made in the spring, right? Fresh tracks, fresh trails, fresh poop, fresh feeding sign, all, like browse. Obviously they're not going to be pawing for acorns or whatever, beech nuts in, June probably, but that sign may look really fresh, and the sign that you actually should be focused on may look old. So you almost want to pay attention to old sign rather than fresh sign, if that makes sense. So there may be a lot of sign concentrated around an early or a young cut, and not that young cut won't continue to feed the deer throughout the season. It will, but I think they could be potentially less focused on that cut as maybe some mass is dropping as they start to disperse. Because, and I guess a good illustration of this is like the Midwest or the West. In ag country, you'll have 100 deer concentrated on a big green food source like an alfalfa field or a bean field. Like maybe you have a 100-acre bean field or you have a 100-acre alfalfa pivot, right? You'll have hundreds of deer coming literally to that area. But when that food source is gone, all those deer disperse, just like a wintering yard. Same type of scenario, right? So just because there's a concentration of deer around a food source or in an area in July doesn't mean there's going to be that same concentration in November or late October. So don't get too crazy about a bunch of crazy sign. Focus on that rut / hardhorn sign is what we'll call it, I guess. Because that's really what you want to look for. So once again, focus on that buck sign, hardhorn buck sign, so scrapes and rubs essentially, and don't get too fooled by a bunch of fresh sign from the summer. Like once again, could be great. He could be right there, and all that sign. There could be a big one in there when you go to hunt and during the deer season, but once again, maybe not. So that would be a big one. Trying to think. I would say don't be afraid to bump deer either at all. Like spend time, lock every inch that you can.
That is one thing I meant to ask you earlier. Yeah. Was what the how worried you are, if any, about bumping deer.
I'm really
in the
not.
summertime.
I don't think that. I mean, a lot of the mountains in the Big Woods area. I shouldn't say a lot of them. A fair amount of them will have hikers anyways in the summer walking around, even if there's no trails. A lot of people are. Bushwhacking, as they call it, is pretty popular now. Backpacking, camping. There's a bunch of other outdoor recreational activities that humans have in the summer. I think the bucks are used to at least encountering a human every now and then during that summer. And I don't think that they react the same during the summer when they get bumped. I just don't think. I think that also probably we have a different demeanor during the summer as well. Yeah. And they can tell, this thing's not trying to kill me. It's like trying to search out a really cool view and take a selfie for social media. It's something goofy like that, right? So
yeah, it's like
I think they can read that. So I'm not worried. Like if you're going, I will say, if you're going to go on there every week of the summer and bust around, I do think you can have a negative impact. But if you're going to go in there a day or two and really break it down, I'm not worried about bumping them at all. They'll come back. Like I said, unless you set up camp in there and you're just in there the whole summer, I think you're good. I mean, as the season gets closer, I would definitely try to keep that intrusion and disturbance to a minimum. But if you're bumping them in 2 months before you hunt them one time, I don't think you're having any impact. I mean, would I rather not bump them? Probably, but I just don't think it's enough to move the needle and really decrease your chances. So, I would say take your time. Don't tiptoe around. Look under every, turn over every rock and behind in every, crevice and try to figure out the area. That's the time to do it. During the season, I'm not super afraid to bump them. I think my rule is during the season, I'm okay with bumping them one time, going in and doing it. But I'm not, the next time I'm hunting them or I'm I don't think you have as many free passes during the season. So I'm not afraid to do that one time during the season, go in and really break down the area, get the scouting and find that fresh sign. But I still am going to have a different attitude and different demeanor during the season. I'm going to go in and I'm trying not to bump them to an extent. And I'm probably not going to hang out forever and just really take my time. I'm going to go boom, boom, boom. What do I need to see? And then get out of there. Bump the deer, maybe cool. Check out everything quick. And then get out. This time of year, you really can take your time, and I feel like it's just maybe a different mindset. So yeah, don't be afraid to bump them. Learn what you need to learn. That's more important in my opinion. Play the long game. Don't be worried about bumping them one time and months before you hunt them, or maybe even years before you hunt them potentially.
Yeah, information is the most important thing, right?
I believe so. Yeah, information's king. The more information you have, I think the more effective you can be.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else to add, or do you think that we're
No,
pretty much covered it?
What do I have to add? We've covered a lot of it. I'd say, we didn't really talk about like exactly what you're going in to scout and what to look for to scout, but we can cover that in a different video. But it's specifically you found your area, or you found an area of interest, you found some pins or some points of interest. Now, how are we going to approach it? Summer is also a great time to scout your entry and exit to an area as well. Maybe you've only accessed this big piece of woods or this mountain from the south, and you're wondering, looks like there's maybe a skid road or a log road that runs up the north side. Is that gated? Can I get a truck up there? Is it private? Is it public? Can I drive a four-wheeler? What condition's that road in? Is it overgrown? Does it actually go up to, where I need to be? Does it look like there's a lot of human traffic on that side? So you don't. It's a good time of year to also scout the area as well, not just the specific spots. You can drive around. You can, usually in the summer there's more human activity than any other time of year, most of these places. So you can get a feel for what's going on in the area. So I would use that as an opportunity to do that as well. That's a lot. So anytime when you're not hunting or hunting season isn't quickly approaching, there's a lot of other stuff you can do to lay groundwork before you hunt or when you have to hunt, so that you actually can spend your time hunting or at least doing the last minute preparations. During the summer, there's no huge rush. So I don't know. I do like to drive the perimeter of a new area. I'll drive say X is where I want to be, wherever that is. I'm like, okay, I'm going to drive the whole way around that area and see, I think I know from the map where the access points are. Then I'm going to drive to the north, and maybe there's a road that's a private road or something. And maybe you talk to the person, or maybe it's a timber company, and you say, hey, can I go in there? Or, whatever. Maybe you get a mile and a half closer on that. And maybe it's not even marked on the map as a road. Maybe it was a fresh log road or cut in. Or, there's a lot of things can change. You can't figure out everything from a map or an aerial photos. Those things are sometimes dated, and even the most recent ones can be a little bit deceiving. So it's always good to do that. Scout your access, scout the area, know what's going on, not just within where you want to hunt, but the surrounding area. You may find something another great example is maybe the image you're looking at is 4 years old, and the year after they took the image, across the road or to the north side of this piece, a mile or two away, maybe they clear cut 500 acres. And if you're just accessing from the south, and some of these areas are really big, you could be talking 5, 10, 15, 20, 30,000 acres. So it takes an hour or 2 hours to drive around that. Maybe 3 hours if you can't come in from the same direction. So maybe there's a 500 acre cut that's 4 years old with primo summer browse. I want to know about that. Maybe that's where the deer you're after is shifted to for the summer. Maybe he's staying there. So just taking that time when you're not under the gun to get in the woods and try to kill the deer, to scout the area and scope stuff out. You can figure out a lot of stuff. I remember one time we heard logging equipment from
that happened to me this year while I was deer hunting.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is it? I couldn't tell if it was over the next roll, but it actually was on the backside of the mountain that I didn't even know about. So
you'd be surprised how far away you can hear that stuff too in the mountains. You can hear it a mile away.
Yeah.
You're like a skidder, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yep. Or a feller buncher or whatever. So just scout for that stuff too. It's not only the deer sign. It's the access, where are hiking trails, what's going on, how has the landscape changed? Scout, maybe there's a huge flood that blew out a dam, and now, whatever. There's so many things. So learn the area. Don't just focus on, I would say, during the summer, don't just focus on the spot you intend to kill the deer. Check out the whole area and get a lay of it. I mean, that stuff, that's the little stuff that you just don't, maybe you just, you're so focused. You come in from the south, you park at this gate, you go in up the mountain off this logging road, and then you go into your area. You get in the habit of it, right? And if you just are almost oblivious to everything else going on, but you want to step back and look big picture, and maybe, like I said, 3 miles to the north, something dramatically different changed, and it's actually really affecting the area you're in, but you have no knowledge of it because you're not paying attention. And that's a big deal. So, scout, micro scout, but then large scale scout, scope out the area, see what's going on. Summer's a good time to do it.
Yeah, because things change, right? that spot that Ross and I kind of revisited while we were still hunting this year where he missed.
Yep.
I'd be shocked if somebody doesn't kill a deer out of there this year.
Yeah, and that was a spot that that's a good thing too. Check spots you've checked in the past. See what some of the sign, even if you've been in there before and it didn't look great, but you had a good feeling. Like I that particular swamp we scouted, I remember on the map, it looked really good, and I went in there years and years. I mean, it was probably like almost 10 years ago when I was in there. Yeah, maybe 8, maybe 7. I don't know exactly. And actually, I think maybe the first time I went in there was probably 8 to 10 years ago, and there was some sign in there, nothing crazy, but some good sign. I was hunting other stuff. I think Ross and I went back in there again, like maybe 5 years ago. 0 sign, like just dead in there. But then this past fall, it turned on. So those shifts can happen too. And if you're not scouting, you don't know about it. And, I guarantee you if we went in there right now, you'd see that same sign from last fall. It wouldn't be as evident as it was when you guys were in there, but you'd see it.
Oh, I mean, there was scrapes the size of cars.
Yeah.
Not car hoods, like entire cars in there.
Yeah. So there you go. But I think that's a pretty good topic, though. One that's super relative to what's going on now and the timing. I'm going to do some of that too, for sure. Like maybe not some of the new area scouting, but just make sure things look as they should, and kind of that big picture scouting. I'll be doing a lot of that. I have a lot of like the micro, spot stuff kind of figured out. I know of a handful of deer that I want to try to hunt this fall, and I'm sure some of them will be there in some of these spots. I think one of them is already, like I said, in one of the spots. But so yeah, the more time in the woods, the more success you're going to have. That's what it comes down to, whether it's during the season, summer, fall, whatever, winter scouting. Whenever you can get in the woods and learn, you are moving the needle and you're pushing your chances of success.
If you guys have any other questions or stuff like that you'd like to see us do another episode about, or maybe we can answer on a Q&A, something like that, feel free to drop us a comment. You can send us an email at justhuntpod@gmail.com.
And we're going to try to help people out as much as we can through the experiences we've had and the successes and failures that we've had. So that's kind of the goal with this, with the podcast, with these types of videos as well. So yeah, please feel free to ask, and we'll do our best to help everybody out if we can, and give everyone our opinion based on our experiences. So we hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment. Let us know what you want to see, just like Matt said, or maybe if you disagree with me, let me know. I want to hear that too, because there's a lot of different other, I like to hear that. If you disagree with me on this type of, oh, cool. That's a different perspective. Let me look at that. Okay. Maybe you have something that I didn't consider because, my experiences are limited. They're not the same as everyone else's. I don't hunt every single area and every single spot all year round, right? So let me know what I'm missing. I want to hear about it. I want to learn. That's part of it too. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.